Elon has always had faith in science. He believed that technology, numbers, and data were the sources of answers. He never gave any heed to faith, religion, or spiritual beliefs. However, for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of emptiness. One night, while he was sitting in his large, silent house, the emotion became even more intense. It was like a tug, force dragging him somewhere, but he didn't know where. He was unable to concentrate on his task, and even the excitement of space travel was not enough to distract him. He said, Altai, why do we look for something else when we already have everything we need? He was unable to fall asleep. He was restless, and his mind was racing. Elon was a man of action, and he would get frustrated when he was unable to solve a problem. However, this was not something that could be resolved via logic or money. He got out of bed and made his way to his study. Have you ever started a book with no expectations and ended up finding something that transformed your life? Elon closed the Bible, feeling overwhelmed. He did not believe in destiny or fate. He was a firm believer in hard work, dedication, and intelligence. Other now, as he stood alone in the dark, there was a voice inside him that was saying that perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to life than what he could see and touch. However, he was not prepared to accept it at that moment. Have you ever had the feeling that something is changing, but you don't feel prepared to deal with it? Even as the days passed, Elon was unable to get rid of the feeling. Whenever he shut his eyes, the Bible was all he could see. He listened to the words. It seemed as if they were beckoning him. He attempted to ignore it by burying himself in his job, but it did not make a difference. The emptiness continued to increase. He started to doubt everything. What if the things we create aren't the most important aspects of life? Elon was recognized for having a visionary mindset. He was respected by others who appreciated him for his courage and tenacity. However, at this point, he was starting to get the impression that there was something else, something that he had been overlooking the entire time. He was unable to fall asleep again one night, so he found himself driving through the city. As he drove by, the buildings' lights became blurry and the streets were silent. He made a quick decision to pull down a side street and park in front of an old church without giving it much thought, as it was little and worn and it appeared to be out of place in the modern world. What causes us to be attracted to locations we never thought we would visit. He spent a long time sitting in the car, looking at the building. He didn't know why he'd come here, but he felt that it was necessary for him to be there. Last, he exited the vehicle and made his way to the church. The doors were not locked. Have you ever entered a place that felt like it was made for you, even if you didn't know why? There was no one in the church. Elon was standing in the doorway, not knowing what to do next. It had been years since he had last set foot in a church, possibly not since he was a child. However, there was something about this moment that felt appropriate. He said he made his way down the aisle and took a seat in one of the old wooden pews. He was still for the first time in a long time. He looked around at the stained glass windows, the silent candles flickering in the corner, and the cross hanging over the altar. He was unsure of what he was meant to feel, but he did feel something, a feeling of peace and quiet. Is it possible for tranquility to originate from something that you cannot see or prove? He stood up and left the church, although he was unsure of how long he had been sitting there. As he went outside, the cool night air smacked him in the face. The city was still peaceful, but he was starting to feel different on the inside. Elon Musk, the man who had invented rockets, electric automobiles, and dreamed of conquering Mars, was beginning to feel something that was new to him, something that could not be explained by technology or money. It was as if a seed had been placed in his heart, and it was slowly developing, pushing against everything he believed he understood. Have you ever had the experience of feeling that everything you believed in was suddenly being called into question? Elon sat in his study, which was barely lit, and stared at the Bible that was on his desk. He reached out and paused for a moment before picking it up again. He felt a weird pull that made it impossible for him to go away, even if he wasn't sure what he was looking for. He turned the pages, pausing at odd spots to read phrases that appeared to be addressing him personally. There was one verse that he found quite interesting. It stated, "What good is it for a person to gain the whole world but lose their soul?" Elon read the words again, and then he read them a third time. They felt as though they were speaking directly to him, and that weighed heavily on them. He had acquired a great deal of power, influence, wealth, but had he sacrificed something in the process? What if you achieve all you want in life, yet you still feel empty inside? He slumped back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, and the question kept repeating in his thoughts. He had spent his whole life pursuing the future, ever searching for the next big thing. However, for the first time, he was beginning to question whether he had overlooked anything significant at some point. He had founded businesses, transformed industries, and motivated millions of people. However, during the stillness of the night, he felt a sense of emptiness. Elon had a nagging feeling that something larger was going on as the hours went by. He felt as if everything in his life had been building up to this moment, but he didn't know why he felt that way. He always thought that he was the one who determined his own future and that his achievements were the consequence of his own hard work and creativity. However, now that he was alone in his mansion, he was beginning to feel that there was something more, something that he could neither control nor explain. What if you are being guided towards something that is bigger than you? He was both frightened and thrilled by the idea. Elon was a man who was motivated by challenges and by pushing the boundaries of what might be done. However, this was not the same. He was unable to fix this problem using technology or money. That was more profound and intimate, and he was uncertain about where it might take him. He could not fall asleep, so he made the decision to go for a drive. The city was deserted, and the lights were making long shadows on the pavement. While he was driving, he thought of the church and the sense of serenity he had experienced there. It was unusual. He was surprised to find that he was feeling anything, but now it was the only thing on his mind. Have you ever felt attracted to a place that you didn't understand? Elon was driving back toward the church without even being aware of it. He was uncertain about the reason for his return, but there was a part of him that was in search of answers. The parking area was empty, and the lights inside the small building were turned off when he arrived. The church was closed because it was late. However, that didn't deter him. He exited the car and made his way to the front steps, where he stood gazing at the large wooden doors. He stood there for a time, peering up at the cross that hung above the entryway, with his hands in his pockets. He didn't know what he was expecting, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him, inside something that would change everything. See what happened if the answers you've been looking for are not in the places you think they are. Elon did not believe in fate or destiny. He believed in hard work and science. However, while he was standing there looking up at the cross, he was unable to get rid of the impression that he had been brought here for a purpose. He had spent his entire life trying to change the world, but now he was beginning to question whether the world had been attempting to change him instead. Elon took a deep breath as the wind picked up and the leaves on the ground began to rustle. He was not yet prepared to step inside, but he was aware that he would return. He felt something inside of him changing, and he was unable to disregard it. What if the purpose of your life is not what you believed it to be? Elon was full of questions. As he drove away from the chapel, he didn't know everything, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he had to. Not knowing and relinquishing the need to control everything brought in a strange sense of serenity. And for the first time in his life, he was starting to pay attention to the present instead of always pursuing the future. At that moment, Elon Musk understood that his life was about to change in ways he could not have predicted. Elon woke up the next morning feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't had in a long time. It wasn't about his company or his most recent initiative. It was something more profound, something he was unable to articulate. He felt an unusual sense of urgency, as if he were about to make a discovery that would alter everything. While he was sitting in his kitchen and drinking his morning coffee, he couldn't stop thinking about the church. He had not gone inside, but he still felt the sense of tranquility that he had experienced the night before. It was like a small flame that had been kindled inside him, and he couldn't ignore it. Have you ever had the feeling that you were about to experience something amazing, but you weren't sure what it was? Elon was not the kind of person who would sit around and wait for things to happen. He was a man of action who was always looking for the next great thing and always moving forward. However, for the first time, he felt that he needed to slow down, take a step back, and seriously consider the direction his life was going in. As the day progressed, he became increasingly distracted. Meetings that usually held his complete attention appeared to be inconsequential. Emails were not responded to, and phone calls were not answered. He was preoccupied with something that he was unable to put into words. Later that afternoon, he found himself back in his study looking at the Bible again. He had not read a lot of it, but the little portions he had seen seemed to speak to him in a manner that he could not describe. What if the answers you have been looking for have been right in front of you the whole time? Elon started turning the pages of the Bible. After he took it up, he felt the need to continue reading, even if he was uncertain about what he was searching for. It looks like the words on the pages were written specifically for him, as if they were speaking directly to him. He read about forgiveness, love, and faith. He had never really considered these ideas previously. His life had always been about making progress and pushing the limits of what was possible. However, while he was reading, he came to the conclusion that achievement was not the only thing that mattered in life. Elon started to doubt his own views for the first time in his life. He had always thought that technology was the solution to the world's problems, and that innovation would be the thing that saved humanity. However, he was beginning to question whether there was something more to it, something that could not be quantified or estimated. What if the future you have been pursuing is not the one you were supposed to have? Elon slumped back in his chair, his mind racing after closing the Bible. He had always been so certain of himself and so certain in his vision for the future, but now he felt uncertain about everything. He had a persistent sense in the back of his head that he was about to find out something that would change everything. He was not yet aware of what it was, but he was certain that he could not overlook it. He felt compelled to follow something that was calling to him, no matter where it would take him. Elon was in a daze for the next few days. His normal routine meetings, phone calls, and managing his different companies felt mechanical, as if his body was going through the motions, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the calm night outside the church and the unusual sense of tranquility he had experienced just by being there. The commotion and pressure of his normal existence felt far away, as if they were part of someone else's life. Have you ever had a moment that made you doubt everything you believed to be true? Elon was walking again one evening as the sun was about to go down. At first, he didn't know where he was heading. He simply allowed his feet to lead him through the peaceful streets. However, it wasn't long before he came to the realization that he was headed back to the same little church he had been to in the past. As his time, he continued past the steps. He opened the massive wooden door and went inside instead. The air was cool and silent, and it was filled with the subtle aroma of candles and ancient wood. The stained glass windows allowed the warm glow of the residual daylight to trickle through, casting vivid patterns on the stone floor. Elon stood there for a minute, letting the silence wrap around him like a blanket. The world he was used to was so different from this one. It was filled with the continual hum of technology, the pressure of deadlines, and the never-ending pursuit of doing more and being more. Have you ever found yourself in a location you never thought you would be and felt at peace there? Elon made his way down the aisle at a steady pace, the sound of his footfall reverberating gently in the deserted church. He felt a sensation of reverence that he couldn't quite articulate, as if he were in the company of something greater than himself. He was uncertain about what had brought him here, but for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. Even though he still did not have the answers, the questions that had been going around in his head for days began to calm down. A big wooden cross was hanging on the wall in the entrance of the church. Elon stood in front of it, his eyes following the image, which was both simple and powerful. He had never given religion much thought before to him. It had always seemed like an old way of interpreting the cosmos, something that had been supplanted by science and reasoning. However, while he stood there at that moment, he was unable to get rid of the sense that there was something more to it. He had never thought about it before, but what if you had been searching for answers in the wrong places all this time? He took a seat in one of the pews and rested his hands on the back of the seat that was in front of him. He sat in solitude for a long time, allowing the stillness of the chapel to envelop him. His mind, which is often full of ideas and plans, was abnormally calm. He reflected on his life, considering everything he had achieved and everything he still intended to accomplish. He had always thought that his role in life was to help humanity move forward and to build a better future for everyone. However, as he sat in this little peaceful chapel, he was no longer certain. Have you ever thought about whether your purpose is different from what you have always believed? As time went by, Elon started to sense something moving within him. At first, it was a delicate feeling, like a faint whisper in the back of his mind. However, it gradually became more intense until it was impossible to ignore. It wasn't precisely a voice, but it felt like something deep within him was attempting to attract his attention. He remembered the Bible verse he had read just a few days earlier. He had been affected by those words in a manner that he could not fully comprehend at the time, but now sitting in this chapel, they made more sense to him. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? He had acquired a great deal of money, authority, and influence, but at what price? Did he lose something at some point? What if you have spent your entire life pursuing something that would never be able to provide you true satisfaction? Elon leaned back on the pew and closed his eyes. He was uncertain about what was going on with him, but he was certain that something within him was undergoing a transformation. It was as if the walls he had constructed around himself, walls made of logic, reason, and ambition, were beginning to show signs of breaking down. For the first time, he was allowing himself to feel vulnerable and to acknowledge that he might not know everything. Have you ever given up everything you knew in order to find out where life would lead you? He was unaware of how much time had passed while he sat there absorbed in his own thoughts. The church was deserted, and the light from outside had disappeared into darkness. After a while, Elon got up and made his way back to the entrance. He felt lighter than he had in a long time as he stepped outside and took a deep breath of the cool night air. He, that he was uncertain about where this adventure would take him, but he was confident in one thing: he could not go back now. What if you have just begun a journey that will completely transform your life? Elon entered his car and drove home, his mind still filled with thoughts and feelings. Although he still did not have all the answers, he felt like he was finally on the right track for the first time in a long time. The emptiness he'd been feeling was beginning to go away, and instead was a peaceful sense of purpose. Elon came to the realization that this was just the start as he drove into his driveway. He was prepared for whatever was going to happen to him, even though it was going to be a long and difficult process. After a long time, he finally felt prepared to confront whatever challenges life might throw at him. Like, have you ever had the feeling that you were about to go on a journey that would completely transform everything you thought you knew? Like, he entered his house, yet the familiar surroundings felt strange in some way. Elon Musk was not the same person he had been only a few days prior. Even while the world outside remained unchanged, he was uncertain about what lay ahead, but he was sure of one thing: he was prepared to find the answers he had been looking for his entire life.